friends, and welcome to That's Just Good Teaching with me, Deanna Smith, where we talk about culture responsive and asset-based pedagogy practices that are actually just good teaching. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe. We are starting our back to school series full of information that is going to help this be your best year yet. So, are you ready for the 4 things that you need to do before you get back to school? Let's get into it. Okay, teacher friends. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you do before you head back to school is get some rest. Now, I'm not just talking about sleeping, although sleeping is very important, but did you know that there are actually 7 different types of rest that you can get? And you are going to need a little bit of all of them to make sure that you are not pouring from an empty cup this year. So let's quickly talk about the 7 different types of rest and what you can do this summer to make sure that you get each and every type so that you're ready to go back to school. So the first type of rest is physical rest, and this is like what we would regularly think about rest: taking a nap, stretching, relaxing your body. Don't feel bad about relaxing, y'all. Rest is resistance. Remember, that is how you rejuvenate. So make sure you spend a lot of time just physically resting before you head back to school. The next type of rest that you want to get is mental rest. And this is kind of the rest that like puts our brain at ease. We're not thinking, we're not actively trying to do something. This is one of the harder ones for me, because as you guys know, I am an ADHD queen, so my mind is always going like a million miles a minute. But some things that I do to get that mental rest is meditate, staying off social media, turning off my phone, and just kind of letting my brain be off for a while, listening to some lo-fi music. All of those things can help you get that mental rest. The third type of rest that we have is emotional rest. And if you are like me and you're a high emotion person, this can be a tough one too. But sometimes you need rest from just take a break from the emotional demands of the day. Like if you have kids, when you get back to school, even if you have a partner, this could look like just taking a break to be with yourself, journaling, taking a bubble bath, spending some time outside, just anything that isn't emotionally demanding where you're not responding to the emotional needs of others, where you're just like hyper focused on your emotional needs and what you have going on and not as worried about other people. And this one, I know for like moms, caregivers out there, this could be a tough one, but it is so important. Next one we have is sensory rest. And like senses are going all day, every day, right? Like we live in this hypersensory world, and you're probably like you're watching a YouTube video right now. There's so much for our senses to take in, but it's important to take a break and give them some rest. So something that you could do is just closing your eyes. Sometimes what I'll do is I have like a low sensory evening where like I'll turn all of the lights down. I'll just use candles, just play like lo-fi music and just calm my brain so I'm not taking so much in all the time, and just don't have a lot coming at you at your senses, whether that's your eyes, your ears, whatever it is, just really being attentive to like bringing the level down on your senses. So the next type of rest that we have is creative rest. And this can be so fun because as teachers, I believe that we are very creative. We're coming up with lesson plans. We're finding new ways to engage and, bring learning to our students. And we're doing a lot of creativity. That's a beautiful part of our job. But sometimes it's good to be creative in other ways. So if you have a creative hobby, like coloring books, adult coloring books, needlepoint, gardening, anything that turns on that creative side. And even if you're not a creative person, because I'm not that much of a creative person, so I used to kind of feel like I couldn't do these things because I'm not very creative. I found that if I relieved myself of the pressure of it being like good or something that you had to like show off or sell, if it was something just for myself, I was able to be a little bit more creative. So dip into your creative side, whatever it is that you like to do, whether it's like a fun hobby or I don't know, painting. I picked up I'm gonna upcycle a rocking chair, an antique rocking chair. So that's gonna be my creative rest. So whatever it is, just get a little creative. The next thing is social rest. I am an extrovert, so this one I have to like physically like sit myself down and say, no, take some social rest. But it's just taking yourself out of like social situations all the time. As a teacher, it could be really important to get this because our social battery has to go all day. So it's important to just take some social rest, even if you're an extrovert like myself. If you're an introvert, you're probably like, got it. But it's an important reminder for us extroverts out there that we do need social rest. And it's okay to, cancel plans, just say no to things every once in a while just to recharge a little bit. And the last type of rest is spiritual rest. Now, this is for like whatever floats your boat, right? But it is important to take some time to meet, to acknowledge your spiritual needs. And that doesn't have to be like if you go to church, that's great. If you pray, that's great. It doesn't have to be anything like that though. If you aren't into that type of thing. I have friends that like really do a lot of yoga, or they do like the meditation, or they spend time in nature, or I have friends that are really into astrology. Like there's all kinds of different ways to get that spiritual rest and rejuvenation. So it's really just tapping into that side, that things that take you outside of your body and really focus on the mind and focus on your connection to whatever higher power or bigger being or higher purpose that you feel in life. That type of rest can be incredibly rejuvenating. So those are the 7 types of rest, y'all. I'm going to run through them really quickly. It's spiritual rest, social rest, emotional rest, creative rest, sensory rest, and physical rest, and I think mental rest. I think that's all of them. Got my notes here. But make sure that you take a little bit of time to get each and every one of those 7 different types of rest before you go back to school. Now, does that mean that you're never doing it again? No, of course not, because we are prioritizing ourselves this year, so we're going to be resting all throughout the year. But these are things that you should do before school, really intentional, take time. Now, if you're anything like me, again, you're hearing these things, but you need to actually put it on a schedule. So that's my challenge to you right now. Go get your planner, get your notes out, do something, and actually plan when you're going to do these things to get the 7 different types of rest. All right, let's move to the next tip. The next thing that you want to think about is your boundaries for next year. Now, whatever boundaries work for you, but it's important to actually lay those out at the beginning of the year. And here's why. When you are in the thick of the year and the chaos of the year and everything is going, it might be challenging to actually step back and create those boundaries after the fact. So I always recommend, especially for new teachers, or if you're going into a new school environment, set those boundaries ahead of time so that everyone is like very clear on what your boundaries are. What do I mean by that? Are you, and there's no shame, are you the type that you are going to go home at 3:30 or whenever release time is? You want to set that for yourself and for your colleagues ahead of time. And as much as it should be, I know someone in the comments is going to say like, that should be what's expected. We shouldn't be expected to stay. That's true. However, some teachers do stay. So you want to make sure that you're clarifying that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just helpful to know like, hey, this is a boundary that I have. Or maybe you are the type of teacher where you're coming in, you're not going to like open your room early. So some teachers, for example, they open their rooms early and do what I call a soft start for their students in the morning. Maybe that's not your vibe. That's okay. Maybe you're not the teacher that is going to have lunch with everybody else. Maybe lunch is your social rest time and you're going to take your lunch in your classroom. Maybe you're going to take your lunch with your students. Maybe you're going to grade during your lunch, whatever it is. But it's important to set those boundaries for yourself and for your colleagues early. So what I would recommend for you to do is actually think through a week, a day, a month, and the school year, and think about what boundaries do I want to set for myself? What do I want to hold myself accountable for this school year so that I can show up as my best self for my students and my colleagues? So for me, I was always a late stayer. I was not an early arrival person, so I wasn't the best at like doing the soft start in the morning, but I always probably stayed at school at least an hour. And half the time I was just like talking to people because again, extrovert talking. But other times I was doing work. So I set that boundary that, hey, don't count on me for things in the morning, but in the afternoon, I got you. That's when Miss Smith is accessible. Or I set a boundary for myself of like, I personally wanted, it was a goal of mine to go to a couple of each of the sporting events that my students were going to be participating in. So that was kind of like a goal that I set. So my boundary was like, hey, I'm going to say no to some things, but I'm going to prioritize getting to one cross country meet, one basketball game, one volleyball game, whatever it is, to make sure that I was showing up for my students. That was the goal for me. I decided ahead of time what communication I was going to have with family. So am I answering emails on the weekends? Am I not? Am I answering emails after school? All of those pieces will show up. It's important to think about them ahead of time, and so you have a plan for what your boundaries will be. And then you also want to think about your sick time, your leave time. Think about how you're going to use that to support your boundaries and your mental health as well. So think through those boundaries so that way you show up on day 1, ready to go. You know what that expectation is. And of course, you can change it if you need to. But I always find it's helpful to communicate with people early on in the year so that there's no confusion and not a lot of room for misunderstanding. So that is the second tip. Think through your boundaries and get ready to set them when you head back to school. So the next thing you want to think about doing is thinking about your own learning plan. Now, I know that you are going to probably be attending a lot of PDs, getting a lot of support, hopefully from whether it's your mentor coach or your teaching coach or your principal, whoever it is. But my teacher friend, I always recommend that folks have a supplementary plan for their learning throughout the year, because the reality is a lot of us just are not going to get everything that we need from either our credentialing program or the coaching and mentorship opportunities that are available to us within the district and like at the school. So what that looks like, it could look like a lot of things. Some of you are probably going to go get your master's, or you're going to get a micro credential, or you're going to maybe take a class so that you can work with your English language learning students better, or culturally responsive teaching. I would recommend, taking one of my courses, but whatever it is, you want to think about how you're going to push your own learning this year. I'm a big believer that we are all learners. We're forever learners. We're always growing. And that's one of the beautiful things about teaching is you can become a master teacher, but you're always fine-tuning and refining your craft. And that's a beautiful piece. So whether that is picking out a book, my book, Rooted in Joy, is going to be out soon, so that would be a great read for the year, just saying. Obviously, I'm going to always advocate for a book. I got all the recommendations if you want some, but pick a book that you want to read or a class that you want to take, or it could be something non-teaching related. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm a teacher now, but my heart is in special education, or my heart is in speech pathology, or I want to maybe one day be a school leader. So you're going to start planting those seeds and learning what you need to learn to go into that shift now. All of that still counts, but I think it's important to give yourself some sort of goal to orient yourself towards still, being the best version of yourself. And that, honestly, y'all, even though we don't think about it as a form of self-care, it is a form of self-care. Investing in yourself, taking care of yourself, and just being the best version of yourself and the fullest version of yourself that you can be is absolutely self-care. So before you start, and once you start school, you're going to be kind of chaotic and busy. And I doubt that you're going to have time to really think hard about what it is that you want to do. Take some time before school starts and say, what do I want to work on this year? What is my goal? For me, I have a few books that I want to read. That's part of my learning plan, and an online course that I'm going to be taking as well. That's part of my learning plan. And I know that when back to school season gets crazy, it's going to be crazy. So I've already bought, purchased, and outlined everything. That way it's easy and ready to go when I have time to do it. So that is the next tip, is figure out something for your own learning plan, or how you're going to continue to develop as a person and as a teacher throughout the year. All right, teacher friends. So the last thing that you need to do is plan. And I'm not talking about lesson plan. I am talking about planning in the self-care days, the fun stuff, the vacations. Make sure all of that is planned out. I grab my iPad because I am a digital planner. And what I do is I pull up the whatever school calendar is. So, for me, I would use the LAUSD school calendar. I would look at when does school recess for winter, when is Veterans Day, Thanksgiving. Some schools have a ski week or President's Day week. We don't have that. But if you have a ski week, if you have a fall break, when is spring break, all of that stuff. Plan your days that you are going to be taking. Now, some of you, unfortunately, because if you don't have a lot of sick time, you might have to plan your kind of boring stuff like doctor's visits and that kind of thing on those days. And that could be fun too. You can make a day out of it, but you want to plan. I actually go in and plan some of my self-care days that I'm already going to take. And some districts have multiple self-care days. Some districts don't, and it's something that I always advocate that all should. I believe that every district should have one self-care day a month that's paid for teachers. But you want to figure out, where are your burnout times? Everyone's burnout times are different. Some teachers, they get really burnt out before you're going for winter recess. Me personally, because I like to think of myself as Mrs. Claus, I love the holidays. That's when I'm the most energized. I'm like ready to go because I'm ready to do all of the fun stuff with the kids. But for me personally, where I really struggle is like March, April, because usually we had a later spring break. So I would have more time. Like once like the thrill of the holidays is over, for me, it's kind of like not like there's nothing going on really that exciting in my life personally until like May. So for me, I tend to put in my like extra days in March, April, and I put that in my mind like that's when I'm gonna take an extra day. But look at your calendar and try to anticipate, okay, when will I need a break? I know some people, they have anniversaries of grief that come up in their life. Like if there's a day that that's always hard for you historically in your family, take that day off. If there's a day like that is going to be really exciting, like maybe it's a milestone birthday for a niece or nephew, or maybe it's one of your kids like 12th birthday, something big, just take it off already. Like plan in your mind how you're going to be organized, because what happens, y'all, is when we get into the thick of the year, sometimes we talk ourselves out of taking those days because we're like, oh, it's so busy and I feel bad and there's no subs. No. Plan it ahead of time so that way everybody is clear. Look, this is the day that I will be taking off, and that's just that on that. So for me, I always take off my birthday. I do not believe in working on my birthday. It's just like, it's terrible to me to work on your birthday because it's my birthday. I want to be doing birthday things. So I always make sure I take off my birthday, or like if my birthday's on a weekend, then I take off some time around whatever it is, whatever's important for you. Get your priorities, get your calendar, and if you can't physically take off those days yet, that's okay. But just start to program in your mind like, okay, busting out my calendar, boom. This is when I'm gonna take off. These are some days that I know I'm gonna want. Oh, I usually get really burnt out around this time, so I'm gonna add some time there and start to plan those vacations, whatever it is, that way that you can stay ahead of the time and there's no funny business when the time comes up. Because I know sometimes schools will be like, oh, well, you have to, follow all these rules. If you lay it out early ahead of time, then everybody knows this is when you will be gone. So that is another way. It's kind of almost part of your boundaries, but planning in your self-care, planning in your self-care days, a massage day with your husband, with your girlies, with your wife, whoever, is a great thing to add in there. Plan that stuff ahead so that way these things don't just sneak up on you. I wouldn't say plan all of them, because we all have those days that just like you wake up and you're just like, I'm not feeling it, and you want to have some of those days too. But plan self-care can really help you stay sustainable. All right, teacher friends, so those are the 4 things that I would recommend that you make time to do this summer before you go back to school, so that this can be your best year yet. I always say this, but I'll say it again, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So make sure that this summer is the time for you to rest, rejuvenate, make your plans, lay everything out so that this can be a really successful school year. Thank you so much for watching. If you are not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And we talked about a learning plan and, something that'll help you grow as a teacher this year. So I, of course, have to plug my book, Rooted in Joy, which is available on August 8th. So if you're looking for something that's going to help you create a classroom that's rooted in joy and inclusion, I would highly recommend checking that book out. There will be a link in the description box below. But with that, make sure you, like I said, subscribe. There's a link to join my newsletter, and keep a lookout because we have even more videos coming that are going to help you rock this back to school season.